November 1993, a sidewalk in Camden, New Jersey. A young woman's body lies in the cold, strangled, sexually assaulted, no witnesses, no suspects. Less than a year later, another murder, a 16-year-old girl, stabbed more than 20 times in her own living room. 2 victims. 2 families shattered. And for 3 decades, nothing. I'm examining the case of Francis T. Schooley, a man who died by suicide in 2000, and how DNA finally connected him to both murders 26 years later. Here's what makes this case different. The killer wasn't caught, he wasn't arrested, he was identified but only after he was already dead. There will be no trial, no conviction, no prison sentence, just answers. And for 2 families who waited over 30 years, that's something. So how did investigators finally solve 2 cold cases when the suspect had been dead for a quarter century? The answer lies in a relatively new science called investigative genetic genealogy. Let's start with the first victim. Marebeth Welsh was 24 years old. She lived in Woodland, a small borough just outside Camden. In November 1993, her body was found on a city sidewalk. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Marebeth had been strangled and sexually assaulted. Investigators collected evidence from the scene, including biological samples, but couldn't identify a suspect. The case went cold. No DNA matches in any database, no eyewitnesses willing to come forward. Just silence. Then less than 12 months later, South Jersey was hit with another murder. This time, the victim was even younger. A high school sophomore with her whole life ahead of her. Jennifer Persia was 16 years old. She was a student at Sterling High School, a saxophone player, and a member of the varsity track team. She had dreams. She had a future. According to CBS Philadelphia, Jennifer was found in the living room of her Magnolia home. She had been beaten, bound at the neck, and stabbed more than 20 times. The brutality of the attack suggested rage. This wasn't random. Someone knew Jennifer, or at least knew how to get inside that house without forcing entry. Investigators collected DNA evidence from both crime scenes. They ran it through every database available. Nothing. The same story, no matches, no leads, no answers. For the families of Marebeth Welsh and Jennifer Persia, the years became decades. Birthdays passed, holidays came and went, and the questions never stopped. Who did this? Why? And would they ever face justice? For 3 decades, those questions had no answers. Meanwhile, Francis T. Schooley was living his life in Mantua Township, just a few miles away. He worked construction. He had access to homes, to families, to victims. According to Fox 29, investigators would later discover that Schooley had done construction work for Jennifer Persia's stepfather at an auto shop he co-owned. There was a connection. In 2006, years after Jennifer's murder, Schooley died by suicide. He was 39 years old. Whatever secrets he carried, he took them with him. Or so everyone thought. In 2024, the Camden County Prosecutor's Office opened a dedicated cold case homicide unit. Investigators began reviewing decades-old cases with fresh eyes and newer technology. The science of investigative genetic genealogy had transformed cold case work. You've probably heard of it. It's the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer in 2018. Here's how it works. When crime scene DNA doesn't match anyone in law enforcement databases, investigators can upload profiles to public genealogy sites where distant relatives may have submitted their own DNA. By building family trees from these partial matches, investigators can identify suspects through their relatives, even suspects who've been dead for decades. According to CBS Philadelphia, in 2025, DNA analysis on sperm samples from both crime scenes was uploaded to FBI databases. Then genetic genealogy work began. The analysis pointed to one family, one bloodline, Francis T. Schooley. But there was a problem. Schooley had been dead for 25 years. They needed confirmation. So investigators did something unusual. They asked his family for help. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, investigators swabbed Schooley's family members for DNA. The results confirmed what they suspected. The genetic profile was a match. Francis T. Schooley, a man who had walked free for years, who had died without ever being questioned, was finally identified as the killer in both cases. In April 2026, Camden County prosecutors made the announcement. 2 murders. 1 killer. Both solved, but with no possibility of prosecution. Let me walk you through the evidence connecting Schooley to these crimes, because the DNA alone tells a devastating story. Sperm samples collected from Marebeth Welsh in 1993 matched Schooley's genetic profile. The same profile matched samples from Jennifer Persia's crime scene in 1994. 1 man, 2 young women, separated by less than a year, both killed in Camden County. Both sexually assaulted. And the DNA ties him to both scenes. The construction connection was equally damning. Schooley had worked for Jennifer Persia's stepfather. He knew the family. He likely knew the house. Construction workers often have access to homes during vulnerable moments, when families are away, when doors are unlocked, when routines become predictable. Schooley's access to Jennifer's family likely gave him the opportunity he needed. And once he had it, he acted. The question investigators couldn't answer and may never answer is whether there were other victims. 2 murders in 12 months. Both sexual assaults, both showing signs of premeditation. This wasn't a man who killed once and stopped, but Schooley died in 2000. Whatever other crimes he may have committed, if any, went with him to the grave. Now, here's where this case raises uncomfortable questions about justice. Because Schooley is dead, there can be no trial. No jury, no verdict, no conviction, just identification. The families know who killed their daughters, but they'll never see him face a judge. Some argue this isn't justice at all. Justice requires accountability. It requires a defendant standing trial. It requires the formal machinery of law. Others counter that for families who spent 30 years not knowing, identification is its own form of resolution. It doesn't heal the wound, but it may help them finally grieve. There's also the question of naming deceased suspects. Schooley can never defend himself. He can never contest the DNA evidence or offer an alibi. But prosecutors argued that the DNA evidence was conclusive, and that the families deserved to know the truth, even if that truth could never result in a conviction. So what does this case teach us about cold case investigation? First, never underestimate the power of preserved evidence. The DNA collected in 1993 and 1993 ultimately solved both murders. Second, technology changes. What was impossible in 1994 became routine by 2025. Cases that seem hopeless today may be solvable tomorrow. Third, investigative genealogy isn't just about catching living suspects. It can identify killers who've been dead for decades, finally giving closure to families who've waited a lifetime. The Camden County Cold Case Unit plans to continue using these techniques. Other families are still waiting. Other cases remain unsolved. For Marebeth Welsh's family, the identification brought a kind of painful relief. 31 years of wondering, 31 years of asking why. Now they have a name. For Jennifer Persia's family, the same. Their daughter, the saxophone player, the track star, the teenager with dreams, finally has justice, or at least as close to justice as they'll ever get. If you've been following this channel, you know we cover cases like this every week. The cold cases that get solved, the investigators who never gave up, the families who kept asking questions. If that's the kind of thing that interests you, consider subscribing. We put out new episodes regularly, and there are always more stories to tell. The Schooley case represents a new chapter in cold case investigation. DNA science that didn't exist when these women died ultimately identified their killer. It's a reminder that evidence matters, that preservation matters, that the cases we can't solve today might be solvable in 10 years, or 20, or 30. For families still waiting for answers, there may be hope. Investigators are re-examining cold cases across the country. Technology keeps advancing, and killers who thought they escaped may yet be identified. If you have information about an unsolved case, don't assume investigators already know. Tips that seemed irrelevant in 1994 might be the key to solving a case today. Cold case units exist precisely for this reason, to take fresh looks at old evidence with new tools and new techniques, and they're finding answers every month. Marebeth Welsh was 24. She had family, she had friends, she had a life that was stolen from her on a cold November night in Camden. Jennifer Persia was 16, a sophomore, a musician, an athlete. Her whole future stretched out in front of her until it didn't. Schooley took both of them. The DNA doesn't lie, and now finally their names are attached to his crimes. There's a certain emptiness to this resolution. The families have answers, but they don't have justice. Not the kind that comes with a verdict, a sentence, a prison cell. What they have is knowledge, the name of the man who killed their daughters, the DNA evidence that proves it, and the closure that comes from knowing, finally, what happened. 2 murders, 1 killer, 0 justice, but after 30 years of silence, answers, and for some families that's everything.